Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you the next episode of Sentai Origins, presented by Hirotaku.com. And today, as always, Raptor is joining me after just having viewed the first episode of Battle Fever J.
Well, watched the first two, but we're here to talk about the first episode. But
yes, and what a first episode was. But Raptor, before we actually get to the episode itself, since we have a longer running time now, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about the behind the scenes of Battle Fever J and kind of where it fits in.
All right.
Now, Battle Fever J first aired in Japan on February 3rd, 1979. Now, it should be noted that this was after, about over a year after the Go Ranger vs. Jacka crossover, which was in March of 1978. This is also a year after, because also in March in 1978, we had the premiere of Spider-Man in Japan. So, Raptor, why don't you go ahead and kind of explain to everybody why that's significant?
Okay, so first of all, if you haven't seen the Toei Spider-Man, go to Marvel.com. They have the entire series on their video section. Watch it. It's weird but awesome. But it is significant because it was not the first two Sentai series, but Spider-Man that introduced the concept of the hero fighting the monster on foot and then having to fight it in a giant form with a mecha.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
Which was actually a mandate done by the executive producers because giant robot toys were becoming popular in Japan at the time. There were several giant robot animes that were burning up the airwaves, and so they wanted to throw in their own giant robot to Spider-Man.
And where this is significant is that for the longest time, Battle Fever J was actually considered the first Sentai because it was the first to follow in the true Sentai formula, where they fight a monster, it gets big, they call it a giant robot. Now, keep in mind, Go Ranger and Jacka, they had like air fortresses, but they never had...
the monsters were never sized up.
Yeah, they never had giant robots, basically. They didn't have the mechas and stuff. They didn't get into those types of battles. Now, retconning the thing, Go Ranger is essentially the first Sentai now, but for the longest time, Battle Fever J was because it had this formula, which was originally created by Spider-Man, which also, let's also point out, Marvel produced, with Toei, Spider-Man, and Battle Fever J. So it's just kind of interesting, this history with Marvel and Super Sentai and how it's like in no way connected to like modern Sentai and Power Rangers and all that. I just find it so weird because wouldn't it be great if like Marvel had Power Rangers and then you could do like the Avengers with the Power Rangers in them?
Hey, if Disney still owned Power Rangers, they would have been connected now.
Absolutely. But let's get to Battle Fever J specifically. So that's just kind of a little bit of a backstory here. And let's talk about the first episode because it's really bizarre. Okay, so first of all, the episode starts out with 3 assassinations, believe it or not. Basically, there's this woman who's going around stabbing people in the neck and the back.
With a poisoned umbrella spike.
Yeah, cyanide, I think, is what it was.
Yeah, it was cyanide.
Yeah. So this organization, simply known as the Battle Fever, gathers 4 of their agents, which I do not know the names and can't recall them or can't pronounce them, so I'm just going to call them by their code names. Japan, France, Kenya, and Cossack. They gather them together. And I will point out that the reason it seems that they are called these code names is they, at one point or another, lived in these countries.
Yeah, so Battle France studied in France for a while. I honestly do not remember what Cossack's connection
I don't think they made a reference to that in this episode. But Kenya, he lived there, and he has the ability to talk to animals, apparently.
Yeah, the Wild Man Ranger that we'd see several more times.
Much like Cole.
Exactly, yeah.
He's like the prototype for Cole, basically. And then we have Japan, who we don't really have much knowledge about him other than
he's just a dutiful agent.
So basically, they're gathered together because of these assassinations, And their first mission, which I think is awesome, is that they're to hunt down the assassin, and they haven't been given their suits or weapons or swords or anything yet.
Completely
in civilian form.
Yeah.
Now, when they actually hunt down the assassin, it turns out it was a decoy from the FBI. That they had this woman called Diane Martin, who actually is an FBI agent.
Yeah, a fun fact about Diane Martin. She was played by an actress named Diane Martin.
Yes. So Diane Martin is the decoy. She was supposed to lead the assassin to her, but got the attention of Battle Fever. And it turns out that her father, I'm forgetting his name, is a FBI agent as well. And, he's like, hey, why don't you join up with Battle Fever and all that kind of stuff? So that's basically how the team gets formed there. And Raptor, I want to take a quick moment to mention the oddity in the fact that Diane Martin basically starts speaking Japanese to them. And because she's established as American.
Yes, both she and the FBI agent are established as American.
And the FBI agent is played by a white guy. But here's what's odd, is that her first lines are in Japanese, and somebody asks, what, you can speak Japanese? And in her response is, as an FBI agent, of course I have to speak many languages.
Yeah, meanwhile, the white guy had to make use of a translation device.
Yes, they have a universal translator that explains why this one character is speaking English, but it's being translated to Japanese so they can understand. So within the span of 2 minutes, they basically contradicted themselves.
Not necessarily, because she was, maybe the FBI agent didn't know Japanese, and she did, because she is established to be half Japanese, half American, so it's entirely possible that she learned Japanese from her family.
But their whole point was FBI agents have to know all these languages. So it's kind of odd. I find it unusual and all that, but I just want to bring that point up. The rest of the episode plays out is that her father dies. He's assassinated by the woman. They finally track her down, and they put on their Battle Fever suits, and they fight what is known as the Umbrella Monster.
Which was an elephant, had an elephant face.
Yeah, there were a couple of things about that, and we'll get to that. But let's talk about Battle Fever J as far as, the characters, the suits, the action, stuff like that. First of all, I got a real sense of character in this episode. Because in the first two that we've seen, Go Ranger and Jacka, you really don't get a handle on a lot of the personalities. And if you do, it's just one personality. The only person that suffers in this episode, I think, is Bal Cossack. I think he's the only one we don't really learn about.
Everyone else gets their identities established.
Yeah, because Japan is basically shown as this, the stereotypical leader, a little bit more of his personality comes out in the second episode, but you can quickly identify who he is. He does have a playful nature, I would say. What do you think about Japan?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. He's the stereotypical leader Red Ranger.
Which isn't wrong in itself, but you quickly understand who he is, and I think that's the important part.
Here's the thing, he only starts to act playful after he gets the suit.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that when we get to other things here. France kind of has this foppish attitude to him. He's a hairstyler, so I guess that ties into it a bit.
And he's a bit of he's an aspiring ladies' man. He doesn't do that well at it, but he's eager to try.
Yeah, he's kind of like Ian without the success, I would say.
Yeah, or Guy from Jetman.
Okay, because I still need to go ahead and watch all that.
Yes.
Kenya I like. I think he was a lot of fun. I love the little scene of him talking to the monkey and the shop owner and all that.
There's a fun scene where he goes to a pet shop and he has a conversation with a caged monkey, and the monkey tells him where he's from, but also that the store owner does not feed him enough. And Kenya threatens to report him to the police and gets kicked out of the store.
Now, I don't think it was played for comedy, obviously, but I really do think he can talk to animals because it seems like that's what's established. At least
it's established in his character that he's He likes animals. And he outright states that he can talk to animals.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about Cossack. There's much to say.
He's given very little character moments. We watched 2 episodes and we still have no idea where he's from and
what's about him. Because, again, we don't even know if he's from the Soviet Union at this point because he hasn't said it. He hasn't had very much dialogue. So
if he's visited there, if he has family from there, whatever.
And Diane Martin, she is kind of interesting. First of all, they don't even call her America because everybody else is called by their country names and all that. But she's just called Diane or Diane Martin and all that. And what's odd is she mourns the death of her father in 2 different ways. And I actually do want to talk about the second episode just in this regard.
Okay.
Because when her father dies, she runs out to the ocean, calls out "Papa," and then is all sad and stuff. Now, first of all, that should have been 2 episodes, or that should have been later on. Because that seemed very quick to introduce a character, kill off the character's father, then we realize it's the father, then she kind of gets over it and has this motivation. But also keep in mind, this is Marvel we're talking about, so that...
Dead parents are par for the course.
Exactly, so that seems to fit in when you look in that context.
But as I was pointing out to you when we were watching it, it seems that this was before Sentai started embracing recurring plot lines over the course of a series rather than just something that's brought up and resolved within the course of an episode. Yeah,
and it just seems to me this could have made a good 2-parter. There was a lot in this episode that could have made for two parts.
If that same plot line was done today, I'm sure it would have been stretched out over 2 or 3 episodes.
Absolutely. But to her character, this is the bizarre part because, again, she's Toa is a trained FBI agent and so forth, and she seems to act like that in this episode. I do find it surprising she wears pants in these episodes as opposed to the short skirts most other female characters
most modern female Sentai have.
Yeah. But what's really odd is actually if you go to the second episode, there's a scene of her shopping with I think it's Kenya is who
it's Cossack.
It's Cossack, yeah. She's shopping with
Kenya was busy.
With the dogs, yeah. So she was talking about Cossack, and basically she has she's making him carry all the boxes of clothes, and she's like, shopping is the best way for me to mourn my father's death.
Yeah, all right. So there's this very strange thing from episode 1 to episode 2.
And actually it's really more like 2/3 of the episode 1 has a very consistent, dark, realistic tone. But once we get to the battle sequence, that's what I'm going to go ahead and talk about is the battle, because I have no idea who did the editing in that, but it was really chaotic and hard to follow.
And, yeah, it's very chaotic, and there are a lot of repeated shots.
And what's odd is they track down the assassin is what happens. And they corner her in a train yard or something. And then suddenly she disappears from the scene. The monster of the day shows up.
Along with the henchmen, which, interestingly, are still confirmed to be people.
Yes, and we'll get into that too. But the battle sequence is it's so jarring, it's hard to follow really what's going on. It goes by so fast, it's so chaotic. It was kind of a big issue for me following it, and I couldn't tell, was the woman the monster, or did she disappear and this monster came in? I don't know exactly what it is.
I think she wasn't the monster, because we see her walking around while was his name Eros?
Eros?
What the religious cult was called?
Egos.
Yeah, Egos is creating the monster and is creating Monster Machine.
Yeah.
And she's walking around doing her thing. So I think they're separate. She summons the henchman and the monster, and she disappears.
Yeah, but again, the battle is all very chaotic, and it takes on a more comedic tone. Now, there are scenes of where Miss America is basically stabbing the foot soldiers in the head with throwing daggers.
As does France with his rapier.
In the neck, too, and that's very violent, I will go ahead and say. But what I'm saying about the inconsistent tone is, once they put on their suits, the general pretty much tells them, you use the power of dance to defeat our enemy.
Yeah.
And that's so contrary to what had just come before in the first 2/3 of the episode.
Yeah, because up until that point, it had been an espionage drama with, kind of a funny title, calling it Battle Fever. But it's espionage drama. They're doing investigations. They're hunting down fugitives.
There's assassinations.
Yeah, and then colorful dancing tokusatsu.
It's almost like they had a completely different idea for a show and then decided, hey, at the last minute, let's give them costumes and a giant robot.
Exactly. And
so, I mean, I liked the first 2/3 of the episode, but again, when I got to the end, it's just like it really kind of went odd.
Exactly. And, we can use that to see into the second episode. The disconnect between the suited scenes and the non-suited scenes is really apparent in that episode too,
Yeah.
but on the opposite side of the coin, that being the villains.
Yes.
Because the episode depicts people converting to the Egos religious movement.
Yeah, let's talk about Egos real quick because I find it so fascinating. So the Egos is basically a religious fanatical cult. And they're normal people who are being led by this talking voice from a crystal.
Yeah, Ego Satan.
Ego Satan, yeah. And their backstory is described as they, are opposed to technology and they look at technology as a poison on the earth. They started in the United States, moved to Europe, and then they're trying to establish a branch in Japan.
And that they're supposedly responsible for every major conflict, war-wise, of the modern era.
And that like ancient monuments are constructed by using Ego's technology or engineering back then. Which, going into the second episode, is actually a contradiction. The second episode is really, really dark when you look at the plot. But it's about fanatical brainwashing and stuff like that. But they actually use technology to brainwash. So it is sort of a hypocritical cult, but that's how most of them are anyway.
Right, and fun little thing I noticed. The sound that the brainwashing machine makes is the same sound that the TARDIS makes in Doctor Who when it appears or disappears. I heard that. I was like, what?
Yeah, he was like, what was that? And I was like, I don't know.
The doctor's coming to save him.
Which I do believe I heard somewhere it was like an old sound library that Toei had from Britain.
Really?
Yeah.
And that makes it entirely likely.
I'm going to have to find that, but I believe that was the case, is that they had like a whole sound library from BBC programming. So.
Oh, then that would totally make sense that it was the TARDIS sound.
So anyway, Egos actually was very interesting. I like how they kind of started off with them because it's a very scary threat, is what it is.
Exactly. It's a lot more real of a threat, despite the fact that, yes, they have a talking crystal as their leader.
And I don't mind the fantasy aspect of it. I just think it's so bold to have a religious cult as your main villain, with your motif being, well, dancing and espionage. Because the last 3 Sentais, they've all been part of government organizations.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, in Go Ranger, you had a terrorist organization,
Mm-hmm.
and
Jacko is a crime organization.
Yeah, a crime syndicate.
Yeah.
And here we have a religious cult.
Yeah, and that to me is more scary than a terrorist organization or crime syndicate.
Which is interesting because these are all earthly threats.
Exactly. We won't get in. Well, I mean, we don't know where the Egos Satan came from or what his story is, but it's obviously he's using real people, actual humans, to do his dirty work, with the exception of the monsters he creates, which, as I understand from the dialogue, is like spawns of himself or imbued
Yeah, they're
with
made
his power.
from his DNA.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough.
So it was just jam-packed, like a lot of stuff. I felt it was rushed in a couple of areas. But Raptor, what did you overall think about the beginning of Battle Fever J?
I would want to watch it more just to see if these plot lines develop more, because I would really be interested to see if this subtle takeover of Japanese society by converting people to the cult continues.
Especially when you consider the fact that it's from America. So I almost think it's like a slant against America and the occupation and stuff like that. I almost wonder if that was the intention.
Well, I know that you haven't watched a lot of anime or a lot of Japanese media outside of Super Sentai. It is a very common trope to have whatever the bad thing is be from America. Godzilla was created by American H-bomb tests. And the recent anime movie Summer Wars, which is about a rogue computer virus threatening the world,
Mm-hmm.
made by the American Department of Defense.
So it is something of a stab against America.
Well,
in some way.
Kind of, but at the same time, you have an American as one of your heroes, and who's not just a Japanese who spent time in America, a half American, half Japanese woman who grew up and was born in America and came over to Japan to join Battle Fever.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good episode. I definitely want to go ahead and see more of it. And, to the point we were making before as well, the suits and context still don't make a lot of sense.
Now, individually, each suit is kind of cool.
Yes, and also, as we say when we did the top 5 worst costumes, is that we understand they're made by Marvel, so it almost seems like there was a mandate. Because also, again, as we say Jack and Go Ranger were not part of this equation when they came up with it. Well, that this was independently developed. I mean, it was developed by the same guy who created Go Ranger and Jacka, but it was supposed to be separate from Go Ranger and Jacka.
And there's another rumor that, to the extent of my knowledge, has never been proved or disproved, that the show was originally being developed as a Captain America series to capitalize on the success of Spider-Man, which explains the international theme of the characters. And I'm going to take a moment here.
Okay.
This may get me this may be a bit controversial, but this proves how freaking ethnocentric Toei was and is with their casting. I understand that Japan is a 98% ethnically homogenous country, but the fact is that these characters are supposed to be from all over the world.
Yes, or at least been to those parts of the world.
Yeah, and the theme is international cooperation, and yet it's played by 5 Japanese people. Well, 4 Japanese people and a half Japanese.
Yeah, and I think the idea is like they're supposed to bring different skills and different viewpoints from different countries.
Really makes me wonder, there were a lot of Americans living in Japan at the time, because the Godzilla movies usually, not always, but they would pretty often have an American character. Godzilla vs. Monster Zero had an American astronaut as one of its main characters. So I'm really wondering, couldn't you have got an American to play Miss America or Battle France or Battle Cossack? And even if they're not American, just a white person. And get a black guy to play Battle Kenya?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been very interesting. I mean, we don't know what the overall plot of the series is, so maybe the international aspect is downplayed. Maybe it's not as big.
When Diane Martin leaves the series, because she reportedly left the series due to the fact that she was from America and her grasp of Japanese was, I guess, not sufficient enough to be starring in the show. And she was replaced by a Japanese woman. A Japanese character, too.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, because first of all, it's the 70s, and no matter where you are, it's the 70s.
Yeah.
And, a lot of this diversity in television didn't really come around until about the mid-'80s anyway. So, and like we said, 98% homogenized. So that could be into it. But I'm not going to hold it against it.
No, you'd hold it against later series, though.
Yeah.
Took Sentai 37 years to get a ranger that was not of Japanese descent.
Ramirez! But in any case, again, I liked it. I would like to go ahead and see more, but we're going to continue our Sentai Origins debate with the next Sentai series. And it's Dinzy Man, I believe, correct?
I believe... No, I think it's Sun Vulcan.
No?
I don't know.
Geez, we are so bad right now. I apologize for this. We should know that.
I'll find out. But one thing I'd like to say in closing, wow, Diane Martin was hot. I know that's going to make me sound pervy, but I thought she was really attractive.
Yeah, for her, yes. I remember what you said about the eyes. That was really nice.
Yeah, because I was looking at her eyes, I was thinking, man, her eyes are very not Japanese. And sure enough, the actress Diane Martin was half white. And I'm a person that loves eyes. That's just me. But anyways.
Yeah, and again, it's a interesting experiment when you look at the history of it and what it eventually led to, because it wasn't Jacka, it wasn't Go Ranger that led to the continuation of Sentai. It was Battle Fever that started this trend. So it has a unique place in history. I never heard anybody complain that it's the third Sentai, and nobody's like a purist and say it's the first Sentai, but I can see the argument for it.
Right. But next time we will return with, yes, you were right, Denzi Man.
Denzi Man, yes. All right. So I want to thank you guys for listening today. Raptor, thank you again for joining, and the tavern is now closed.